Hello, welcome to Just the Dis. We talk about Blu-rays here, and I have my new disc box. Going to do another collection update. I'm going to get right into it, and we're going to talk about a 4K. This is a new one from Blue Underground, whose track record so far is impeccable with their 4K releases, and Dead and Buried is truly one of the horror gems of the 1980s. And I know I'm not alone in suggesting this. However, I do feel like there are still a lot of people who aren't aware of it. Definitely hardcore fans of horror know the film. But this is a Guillermo del Toro favorite, and it's from director Gary Sherman, who did things like Vice Squad, Deathline, and Poltergeist 3. I'm a fan of all three of those, and Gary Sherman is just a really solid director. And this Blu-ray looks really, really good. One thing I will add about the look of it, though, it's a new transfer. Obviously, it's a 4K scan, and it looks nice, but the film has a good amount of grain to it. And one thing to keep in mind is that this is a darker palette kind of movie. There's a gloomy, overcast kind of, vibe to the whole thing. And that was, I think, purposeful. And they even talked about, Gary Sherman talks about in either one of the interviews or one of the commentaries about how the opening sequence they had to shoot with a little bit of sun, and they had to use like this gigantic flag on a crane to try and cut down on the light so it didn't look like straight sunny, which I thought was really interesting. But yeah, the overall vibe is this sort of gloomy, overcast look. It's set in a town called Potter's Bluff, which is ostensibly, I believe, supposed to be Maine, but it's shot in Mendocino, California. And it's one of the great seaside horror films, along with The Fog and Messiah of Evil, maybe. But yeah, in terms of cities I wouldn't like to visit on the coast, Potter's Bluff and Antonio Bay are right up there. But okay, so great movie. Has to do. It's one of those that I really don't want to talk about the plot too much, because a lot of the enjoyment you might get out of it, if you haven't seen it, is sort of watching it unfold. But basically, it opens with there's some people getting killed by the locals, and the local sheriff, played by, I'm gonna remember here, James Fiorentino, is trying to figure things out, and it's a little bit conspiratorial, but again, I don't want to give away too much. I really want people to see this and go in as blind as you can. I wouldn't even recommend watching the trailer. This is just a great horror movie and a good blind buy, and another great 4K from Blue Underground, who are just killing it. But this has a lot of great extras. It has, I think, 4 commentary tracks, 3 older tracks that are from DVDs and Blu-rays previous to this. There's an audio commentary with director Gary Sherman, which is hosted by David Gregory, who was working for Blue Underground at the time. Obviously now we know he runs Severin, but so he's there with Gary in that commentary. The second one is with co-writer and co-producer Ronald Shusett and actress Linda Turley, and the third one is with the director of photography Stephen Poster. I really want to listen to that one. And then there's a new track. The 4th track is with film historians Troy Howarth and Nathaniel Thompson, who we know from lots of great genre commentaries, and they are a good duo that I'm definitely a fan of. I listened to some of that track and was absolutely digging it. Now, in addition to that, we have new behind the scenes on Dead and Buried, which is about 33 minutes, and it's all 8mm footage. Basically, they had a camera on the set that they would let anybody pick up and film something with, and I think they had something like 15 hours of footage that they've whittled down to 33 minutes. and it's all MOS. There's no audio for that footage. So what you get is a commentary by Gary Sherman, I think the first AD and the DP, talking about the footage, who's in the footage, what was happening on the day that, this footage was filmed. And so it's a neat little intimate, portrait of what, the shooting was like, what the set was like. And then there's a new interview with Gary Sherman and composer Joe Renzetti, talking mostly about the music. Let's see, Dead and Buried locations now and then. That's pretty self-explanatory, but also interesting. And then The Pages of Potter's Bluff, an interview with the novelization author Chelsea Quinn Yarbrough. And then some older stuff here. You have Stan Winston's Dead and Buried effects. I mean, another one of the big reasons to watch this movie is the Stan Winston effects are incredible. There is a scene where... nope, I don't want to give it away. I'm not going to do it. But it's a really great sort of transformation scene, we'll say. And it's done, I think it's like slow sort of stop motion forward in time, but it's just brilliant. And there's just a ton of great effects throughout. So that's just an additional feather in the cap of an already good slow build sort of horror, movie. Robert Englund, an early work of horror. So that's an interview with Englund, who's one of the cast members of the film that you'll recognize. One of the other ones is Jack Albertson, who is the grandpa in Willy Wonka. He plays the coroner of this town, and that's a really interesting part for him. He brings some humor to the movie. Apparently there was more humor in the film that the distributor ultimately, I think, or the studio that they were working with sort of had to cut out, but there's still a little bit of humor in there. But it does sound like a troubled production. Gary Sherman mentions that, the company that financed the film was purchased by another production company while they were shooting, I think, and then again when they were in post. So the company sort of changed hands twice, and I think that sort of meant more cooks, and just it's incredible this movie turned out as good as it did. And then last, there's an interview with Dan O'Bannon called Crafting Fear. This is, of course, before Dan passed away, I think in 2009. It's about 14 minutes, but a great interview with him. And he talks about how, they really sell, from the creators of Alien and stuff. And it's kind of a con in a way, it sounds like, because Dan was saying that he, worked on the script a little bit, but it was more like looking at the structure, and I don't think he thought he did that much. But the producer of the film and co-writer Ronald Shusett basically insisted, like, we need to put your name on this movie, and it's sort of because of the heat from Alien, would help the film, be produced, and I think it did. And I think especially when Dan heard that Stan Winston was going to be involved, he was a little more okay with it. But ultimately, apparently he had just finished a long arbitration process on Alien about a script he did write, so he felt weird about taking credit for somebody else's script. But, it helped the movie. But just know, it's not exactly his script, although he was involved. But he does explain a little more in the interview what he did do. But anyway, it's a packed special edition, and it is just one of the, one of my favorites of the year so far in terms of, so you got your booklet, good stuff, nice essay in our booklet here. I know a lot of people are big fans of the booklet, and that's a new essay there. And then, of course, we get our soundtrack CD, as well as the Blu-ray. Now, here's something to note. In some cases, and I'm not saying Blue Underground does this, but you'll get a 4K reissue, and you'll get a Blu-ray. But if the film has been on Blu-ray before, sometimes they just bring the old Blu-ray over. In this case, they are bringing all the new features, and I would assume the new transfer to the Blu-ray. In fact, I'm 99% sure, because the transfer on the Blu-ray looked good. I checked that out too. So this is just a killer package overall. Obviously, I have, this alternate artwork on the inside here. I flipped it. Actually, like the old original artwork for this one. But another killer 4K from Blue Underground, who are just, along with Arrow, doing just incredible genre 4K work. And I anticipate each of their new releases with great excitement, as they have not disappointed yet. So that's what I'm going to kick it off with. Great place to start. Another 4K I have here, this one from Paramount. This is Almost Famous. And this is cool because it includes 2 cuts of the film. You have your theatrical cut and most of the special features on the first disc. And then you have the bootleg cut, untitled as it was, which has only one special feature, but it's a good one, and that is the commentary with Cameron Crowe and friends. And that is like somebody from DreamWorks, and there's a few other people in the room, but ultimately what it ends up being is Cameron Crowe and his mom. And it is a wonderful commentary. There's a lot of great insights from Cameron Crowe and his mom, and they're not like fact-checking the movie, but they're like, well, this really happened, or this is what this scene is based on. Mom, do you remember this? And his mom just seems like really sweet, and it's sort of really sweet to hear his relationship with his mother. But anyway, so this is obviously a very good movie. A lot of people know this film. A lot of people like this film. It's based on Cameron Crowe's youthful experience when he was first writing music criticism. He started with, I think, his high school paper, and then he started corresponding with Lester Bangs of Cream Magazine, who, of course, is a character in the film, played incredibly by Philip Seymour Hoffman. And so then he's writing for Cream, and eventually gets picked up by Rolling Stone and goes on tour. I think the tour that it's sort of loosely based on is the Allman Brothers tour that he did circa 1973, when most of the action in the film takes place. And of course, it's him, played by William Miller is the character's name. He's played by Patrick Fugit, and it's a really great performance. It was an early breakout sort of performance for Fugit, and of course, Penny Lane, played by Kate Hudson, Jason Lee, and Billy Crudup, of course, are in the band Stillwater, which is this fictional band that he sort of, gets involved with, and it's a great little movie. I enjoy it more each time I watch it, and I really do like the bootleg cut. I want to say the difference between the two is theatrical cut runs 2 hours and 3 minutes. The bootleg cut runs 2 hours and 41 minutes. So it's a significantly longer version of the movie, but there's a lot of great scenes in it. A lot of scenes that Cameron Crowe's mom is kind of bemoaning being cut out of the movie. He's like, well, Mom, we put that back in, and so that's I was really digging that commentary. But there's also just tons of, they have what they call like the greatest hits, which is the old, features, like the intro by Cameron Crowe, the making of Almost Famous, which is a little, EPK-ish, a little, made for the production. There's a 2-minute or 3-minute interview with the real Lester Bangs, which is interesting. Cameron Crowe's top albums of 1973, Fever Dog music video, a whole bunch more stuff. But the new stuff you get is a filmmaker focus interview, which is often the case with these new Paramount releases. That's a very condensed interview with often Leonard Maltin, but in this case, Cameron Crowe. It's about 8 minutes. And they usually end up sort of repeating some of the stuff you've heard in the other special features, but it's a good interview and it's a nice encapsulation. Cameron Crowe on Almost Famous, casting and costumes, rock school, extended scenes, odds and sods. These are all new featurettes that have been added to the theatrical cut disc. And so when you put it all together, it's a Criterion level release. 2 cuts of the film, the commentary, the new and old features. It's really pretty fantastic. And the movie looks very good. Obviously, it's been taken care of. So it's a really nice 4K. And Paramount did a great job with this one. So I do recommend this. If you're a fan of the movie, or if you're, even a passing fan, this is well worth your time to pick up. And like I said, 2 cuts of the movie, 2 discs, lots of extras, and a good transfer. So that's another 4K. That's a steelbook, and then I've got another steelbook here. This one I haven't even opened yet. I just picked it up. It is The Battle Beyond the Stars 4K, new scan, but this is a Blu-ray of Battle Beyond the Stars from Shout Factory, part of their Corman collection. And one of the reasons I get these steelbooks, for instance, I don't often rebuy stuff I've already got, but let's say Piranha comes out, okay? And the new steelbook. I'm not a big steelbook collector personally. That's just not. I've gotten some with the 4Ks and I'm getting into it a little bit, but I just can't rebuy everything on a steelbook. It's just not feasible for me. But so Piranha comes out. What I recommend is if you look on the Shout Factory website, see if they're doing a new scan. And in the case of Piranha, they did a new 4K scan from the original camera negative. And they did a new audio commentary with producer Roger Corman. And then they brought over all the features from the old Blu-ray. So I was like, okay, new scan and a new commentary. I'm into that. And I like Piranha a lot, so I'm going to get it. This one, it was just the new scan that got me. In this case, it's not a new 4K. It's a new 2K scan of the inner positive. But I like this movie enough, and the Blu-ray was old enough that I felt like, okay, that master's got to be pretty old. This is going to look better. That ultimately sold me on this. So keep an eye on this one to go on sale. But obviously, you still have some more great features. One of the great things about this movie, it is a Seven Samurai knockoff in space, sort of Star Wars meets Seven Samurai, if you will, something like that, which is written by John Sayles, who was doing a lot of work. In fact, he wrote Piranha, and he wrote Lady in Red, and he wrote The Howling. I mean, he wrote a bunch of stuff, lower budget stuff at the time that I always find fascinating. So anyway, that commentary has been brought over, as has the commentary by production manager Galen Hurd, the man who would be Shad, actor Richard Thomas, and Space Opera on a Shoestring, comprehensive look at theatrical challenges. So this is one of the more expensive movies that Roger Corman ever made. James Cameron, a very young James Cameron, was working in the special effects department sort of at the time, and so he worked on some of the special effects. This, of course, has a wonderful score, a very triumphant space opera epic score by, of course, I just totally blanked right when I needed to, James Horner, of course, who Cameron himself would go on to use in a lot of his films. But I know that the music for this film was so good that Corman would then use it again in other movies because he owned it. But it's a really fun and, well-made, on a shoestring kind of science fiction movie. So I dig this one quite a bit, and I think it's a little underrated. But that new 2K scan of the inner positive is going to be worth it, I think. I think it's worth snagging. Okay, some indies here. Mr. Jealousy from 1997. This is Noah Baumbach's second film, his follow-up to the great Kicking and Screaming, which I saw on videotape circa 1996, I think. I was working at a video store at the time, but we didn't get Kicking and Screaming, so I actually had to go to the cool video store down the street and rent Kicking and Screaming, which I did, and I watched at least 2 or 3 times during the rental period that I had it, and I loved it, and it was and is still a favorite for me. So when I saw that Mr. Jealousy was coming out, I was very curious about it because I just dug what Baumbach had done on the first movie, and this is a really nice follow-up. The idea is that Eric Stoltz plays the titular Mr. Jealousy. He's a perpetually jealous guy. He is a substitute teacher, I think wants to be a writer. He's trying to apply for a writing program at Iowa. And he falls for this girl when his friends, one of them played by Carlos Jacot and the other played by, is it Marianne Jean-Baptiste, I think, from like Secrets and Lies and stuff. They introduce him to this character played by Annabella Sciorra. They hit it off. They start dating, and his old bad habits kick in. The idea is that he had a girl dump him for an older guy early on, a club promoter, his first relationship, and so then he became perpetually jealous and ended up sort of, stalking his girlfriend's exes, and it just became bad news, and it's sort of plagued him. So he's trying not to do that, but instead of not doing that, he goes all in and becomes obsessed with one of her exes, played by Chris Eigeman, who of course was in Kicking and Screaming, who is a young novelist who's just had a relatively successful first novel. And, initially he's going to leave him alone, but then he ends up joining the guy's therapy group, which is overseen by Peter Bogdanovich, who plays the therapist. And then he has to sort of pretend to be someone else. He doesn't want to reveal himself, and all that's very funny. And it's just a ridiculously silly setup, but it's very fun. And it's well done. And Carlos Jacot is great. Brian Kerwin is great. You'll recognize him from Kicking and Screaming as well. But I was really happy to see this finally get a Blu-ray. This is the first Blu-ray that it's gotten, and it's been sort of out of circulation for a little while. And the Blu-ray looks good, and it also has something called Revisiting Mr. Jealousy, which is about 41 minutes. Brand new feature including new interviews with cast members Brian Kerwin, Peter Bogdanovich, producer Joel Kasselberg, along with vintage interviews from writer-director Noah Baumbach. Oh, John Lear, that's who I was thinking of. He plays Lint in this movie. He's in Kicking and Screaming too. So it's a cool, interview thing. The Brian Kerwin stuff is okay. The Bogdanovich stuff is interesting. Kasselberg is interesting, but the old interviews with Baumbach, there's one that you start off and it's very much like a press bite, but then there's a couple that are like from Q&As from revival screenings of the film, and he's talking about his work in general, and they get some good bites from him, some good sections of him talking about his work. So overall, it's a really nice extra feature. And that's it really, though. There's the trailer and that's it. But this is from MVD Marquee Collection, MVD Visual. But I do recommend it. It's, a solid 90s indie that has held up as far as I'm concerned. And speaking of indies that have held up, and I think this is one also from the 90s. Yes, 93. And this one is called What Happened Was. And obviously it is a film by Tom Noonan. It is written and directed by him. It stars him, and his co-star is Karen Silas. And it's a really fascinating movie. A movie that I remembered seeing on VHS, but one that has, again, also been completely unavailable until, you could buy it streaming on Amazon for a minute, and then it popped up streaming elsewhere, but it was only SD. And now it's popped up on the Criterion channel. You can watch it there. But this is a new, apparently 4K restoration of the film. And it's just fascinating. It's for fans of things like My Dinner with Andre, but it's a little bit more interesting than that in some ways, because it's very much like a two-person play. In fact, it's based on a play that it's by Tom Noonan, and it is him and Karen Silas adapted it for the stage, and they ran it for like 6 months, and they really perfected the material. I should back up a second. There's a really great interview with Tom Noonan on here with his producer Scott McCauley, and he talks about the headspace he was in when he made the movie. The idea is it's a first date between a paralegal and this other woman who works at this company, and it's a long evening conversation kind of thing. It's kind of a hangout, but ultimately I don't want to give away too much, but it's one of those things where it starts in one place and the balance of power is one way, and it starts to shift at a certain point, and it's fascinating, an absolutely fascinating watch, especially considering it's just two people. But when you hear the story behind it, you understand how they could have honed that material so well and understood it so perfectly that it makes sense that they would be good in terms of the performances you get in the movie. So that's the story. But basically, Tom Noonan tells the original origin idea in that he was working, I think, on RoboCop 2 as the villain. He was going into work one day and his face had started twitching. And he was like, what is happening? And he finished up his work on RoboCop 2 and he, figured like, okay, I need to figure out what's going on. No doctor could tell him what the face twitch was about. And he realized it's probably about the fact that I'm not working on what I want to be working on. So he took a year off and he just started writing. And that's where the play sort of came out of. And so with the play, once they got it going, it was, a successful thing. I don't know if it made a ton of money, but it was certainly a play that caught a lot of people's attention. And, eventually they caught the right producer's eye and they were able to adapt it into a movie. And they apparently did the play itself as kind of like a round set, I think, so that when you made the movie, that ultimately they didn't have to change too much. Their blocking was relatively the same and their chemistry is amazing. It's one of those movies you watch and you're just like, well, that's not like too many things I've ever seen before. So I'm a big fan of it and was really excited this got a Blu-ray. This is from Oscilloscope Laboratories, and it's one of these things where it's in a eco case kind of thing. Not my favorite, but ultimately it doesn't matter. I'm just happy to have it. So that's what happened was. Also has an interview with Karen Silas on here as well, and an exclusive essay by film critic Sheila O'Malley. But really happy to see this looking so good. Next up we have Mail Order Murder. This is from one of the Vinegar Syndrome partner labels. It is from, they are called Saturn Core, I think, right? Saturn's Core Audio Video. And I'm not sure I'm going to show this whole slipcover, but it's a nice slipcover from the Vinegar Syndrome folks. You can get this on the Vinegar Syndrome site, but this is a documentary about a company called Wave Productions, which is headed up by a guy named Gary Whitson. And I guess he was a school teacher, and he was a big horror movie fan, if I'm understanding the story right. And so he had started making his own films on video with camcorders and stuff, and was just sort of coming up with his own stories. He's got one he tells about that's like a time daylight savings time slasher or something like that. I don't know, with twins. Anyway, point is that one thing that he came up with was that he used to do things on assignment. Like he would do cartoon sort of comics. Like people would ask for certain things and he would do them, sometimes fetishistic things. And so he made that a part of this company. And so then it became a thing where people could send in ideas, sometimes just a paragraph or two, sometimes a full 90-page script of a movie they wanted done, and they would finance it. And by that I mean, $500, $600, $700. These are micro budget movies, but they are absolutely crazy. And one of them is actually included here. It's called Wave of Terror from 1988, a horror anthology comprised of 2 early shorts. That's a bonus, which is a great bonus. But anyway, so the documentary is all about Whitson and a lot of the main actors that he used over and over and over again in the films, and just a fascinating portrait. It reminds me a little bit of Off the Charts, a song poem story, which is about the companies that used to do mail order songs. You would send in lyrics and they would make a song for you. Also a great documentary, which I think you can find online somewhere, but this is the video version of that. But the movies just look crazy. I'm not as big of a shot on video movie fan as some, but when they're bonkers, that is definitely a draw. And the opening section of the movie shows clips from, I think, about 40 of the 400 films that Wave Productions produced. And there's crazy stuff. People shooting lasers at each other, people getting gory deaths happening to them, but in a lower budget, but relatively effective special effects kind of way. But really a fascinating documentary. Also has an audio commentary with directors Ross Snyder and William Hellfire, extended interviews, and vintage wave cable access TV appearances and interviews. And it is all region. But so that's one of the first from the Saturn's Core audio and video label, partner label for Vinegar Syndrome. So that's cool. And then this one I got sent. It's from Doppelganger Releasing. It's called The Monster Collection, and it actually includes 2 documentaries. One is called The Frankenstein Complex, and the other is called Phil Tippett, Mad Dreams and Monsters. I want to say Frankenstein Complex is from 2014, maybe. And it's, 2015, sorry. And it takes sort of a historical look as well as a creative look at the mix of fascinating, using behind the scenes stuff, film clips, and dozens of interviews with all kinds of big names like Dennis Muren, Gregory Nicotero, Guillermo del Toro, Joe Dante, John Landis, Kevin Smith, Phil Tippett, Rick Baker, Stephen Chiodo, actually most of the Chiodo brothers, Steve Johnson, Tom Woodruff, lots of effects folks. And it sort of gives a broad history of practical effects. And, it starts with, sort of a brief look at the Universal monsters and the stuff that Dick Smith was doing and now how that influenced other people on up. And it sort of progresses up through close to the present day, going up to Terminator 2 and then beyond. And it's a good, solid documentary. I enjoyed it, but I think I even enjoyed more. Phil Tippett is obviously part of this one, but the Phil Tippett Mad Dreams and Monsters from 2019 from the same directors is more in depth with him. And I think I got a little more hooked into it. It also includes interviews with Joe Dante and Dennis Muren, and John Davison is involved. Paul Verhoeven is involved. Because if you didn't realize, Phil Tippett actually, one of his first things he ever worked on was Piranha. He did the Piranha in that movie. And so it kind of follows Phil Tippett's career as he goes from Piranha to Star Wars, where, he did some stop motion stuff in the Cantina, and he helped design some of the monster masks for the Cantina scene. And maybe some stop motion too. But then he goes on to Empire, where he does the Tauntaun, and he helps with the AT-ATs, the Imperial Walkers. Then he goes to Dragon Slayer, Return of the Jedi, RoboCop. He did, the Ed 209 and RoboCop 2. And then it goes even a little past that, but it gives you sort of an interesting overview of his career. And he's a really interesting dude. Long beard. He's a character, and he's pretty low key about everything he's done, and he's accomplished a lot. I mean, he's won an Academy Award, and he helped with Jurassic Park, and just a really big deal in the special effects community. And so I think Frankenstein Complex is good, but it hits some beats, and talks about, American Werewolf in London and just things I've heard before. And it's cool, but it's kind of a greatest hits in some ways. And that's great. And there is some stuff in there that I didn't know, so I don't want to act like I knew everything. But the Phil Tippett one, I think just because it was a little more personal, it got me a little bit more. But this set has so much stuff. Like the movies themselves are 83 minutes and 107 minutes. But then there's 290 minutes and 270 minutes. So over 12 hours of bonus material on 3 discs. And so you have your inside, and that folds out again. And so then you have, this is the bonus disc. That's just the bonus disc. And then you have your Frankenstein Complex there, and the Phil Tippett there. And it folds in like that. So it ends up looking like this. But, for for fans of, you know, prosthetics and physical effects, I think it's a really great pair of documentaries, and I haven't even had a chance to dig into the 12 hours of bonus material that's available here. So I appreciate Doppelganger sending this one. This is very interesting, and I'm glad to have gotten my hands on it. I do recommend it. But that's it for this collection update, and hopefully there's some stuff in here for you to enjoy. Definitely check out the Dead and Buried 4K. That gets my highest thumbs up. Great movie and a great package. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. I will talk to you very soon. Bye-bye.